computer. Okay, screen. Okay, so what we have here is her sun and Venus in the 10th house. You see here the MC. So the MC is, the 10th house is a house where you find people that are well established in the world of work. They solidify their presence in the work scene. They gain some recognition. That's what the 10th house is about. And again, she was born March 15th, 1933 in Brooklyn, New York, but we don't have the time. So what I'm doing here, I'm exercising a look into what could have been her ascendant and then the positions in the house. And why did I do that? How did I do that? I studied her life legacy, and I understood that by putting certain planets in certain places, it would make sense. And then we could study her chart from that perspective. So as I said, I have here, you can see Venus in the 10th house, Pisces, she's Pisces. And then with the estimate ascendant time of birth that I kind of like I calculated to be around 11:15 a.m. because this puts Venus conjunct the midheaven. The midheaven is where you project yourself out in the world. You receive recognition from the public arena. And then she had a lot to do with being the second female on the Supreme Court of the United States. So she had some kind of excellence to be there. She was the first in her class at Columbia University in New York, where she graduated. She had a lot of struggles related to how she got that job. First of all, she was appointed by Jimmy Carter to be a judge at Washington, D.C. for a long time. And then in 1993, Bill Clinton appointed her as a Supreme Court justice. And the most of her cases that she took at heart, to heart, they were related to women's cause, related to abortion, to the women's right to do whatever she wants with her body, to have her choice. She also fought for the LGBT, for people, gay people, lesbians, and for their rights. And then I see that her presence in the LGBT society, that group, with the presence of Uranus in Aries in the 11th house, because the 11th house is the house of groups. And Uranus being in Aries in the 11th house shows that she was ready to advocate for a group that had some kind of rebel attitude, which is Uranus in Aries in the 11th house. And then she has Pluto with the chart that I created. She has Pluto in Cancer in the first house, which means that she gained a lot of personal power, because when you have Pluto in the first house, you are someone who is perceived, your physical energy, as someone who is able to have an impact, to have an influence in with your presence. And it was funny because she was so small. She was really Piscean. She has Venus in Pisces. The sun is in Pisces. and then she was a woman of a small stature, but when she entered the room, everyone was like really honoring her big time. So this Pluto here really shows that. Not to mention that she has Pluto in trine to her sun in Pisces at 24 degrees of Pisces. Pluto is at 21 degrees of Cancer, and then her sun is at 24 degrees of Pisces. So this is also something that can allow a person to slowly, the transformative ways, fighting for her personal power slowly but surely, because the ninth house is a house where you climb that solid place in society where you're going to be on top, right? So you have to have stamina to climb that ladder, that will take you to a position where everyone will see you. And since she has Venus there, Venus also tells people that, you can see the people with a lot of convincing power, because Venus is very seductive. At her earlier ages, when she was young, she was a pretty woman. As she got older, of course, you lose some of that, brightness, but still, she was very charming. And then also with a Piscean way, she was very sweet, in the way she talked. But she has Mercury and Uranus in Aries. So she said whatever she had to say. It wasn't that she was shy. She was always very decisive in her understanding about the law, about the final decision on something that needed to be addressed for the nation. 10th house and 11th house, these two houses here are houses that talk about a public presence. Okay, when you see in my chart, in my correction that I did, we see that she has a Chiron in Taurus in the 11th house as well. I'm not saying that it is in the 11th house, but I created this chart because a lot of variables took me to this conclusion. Look at what she has here in her third house. She has Mars, which gives her the assertive, precise conclusion, and also going through very specific details of the laws of her conclusions as well. And then it's together with Neptune, which also gave her the ability to say things that would touch people's hearts, because Neptune is also in the third house. But it is known that she was a very quiet woman when she was not defending anything. She was a woman of very few words, which could also be a representation of this Neptune in the third house, right? Okay, so keep that in mind, that she had Mars in Virgo in the third house, and then Neptune in Virgo in the third house, and then she also has Jupiter in Virgo. But here, the way I calculated the chart, she has Jupiter in the fourth house, which could also mean that she defended the law of the land, which is Jupiter in the fourth house. The fourth house and the 10th house could bring a lot of that feeling of the law of the land, the country. And she has from this perspective, she has a lot of asteroids here on the 9th house, all these planets in the 10th house, Uranus in the 11th house, defending some how can I say, controversial subjects, you know, controversial themes that could really raise a lot of, you know, opposition too, because she has Pluto in the first house, which could really bring some opposition to the way she defended things, you know, because especially on human rights and women's rights and abortion and LGBT. I think that's it. And she also had a long, marriage. So I thought that Saturn on the seventh house, ruling the seventh house, which would give us the perspective of her having a long-term relationship with someone. And then she also had, from this perspective here, I see Saturn. I put Saturn on, falls on her eighth house, which she had Cancer, a type of cancer that took a long time. She survived some of her cancers, and I think she had pancreatic cancer, and then she developed lung cancer too. And so the ruler of the seventh house is in the eighth house from this perspective, and it's in Aquarius, which means that she married someone with the same outlook she had in life, and he died ahead of her. He died 10 years before she died, which means, you know, a marriage, a husband that died before she did. Okay. And also because you look at her, the moon in the fifth house, which means that she had kids, and these kids that she had, the first baby she had when she was applying, she just finished you know, her graduation, and then she kind of like had to hide that she was pregnant from her second child. The first child, she had her kid was 4 years old when she graduated, and one of her teachers went to look for, helped her look for a job. And then the person, the office, the law office that was talking to the professor who referred her to this office said, well, but she's a woman and she has a 4 years old kid. And so the professor told this guy, this lawyer in this office, he said, if you don't take her, she's my best student, I will never refer any of my students to you. So that's how she started her career, you know. So it shows here too, the moon in the fifth house in Scorpio made her become this very fierce, strong woman. And this moon in Scorpio is in a big trine. It's in a grand trine with Venus and Pluto, okay, which gave her a lot of power, you know. And she was the second justice in the Supreme Court, but she was definitely the most notorious. That's why she got this nickname, you know, notorious, RBG, you know, that was her nickname. And so when you look at this moon here, moon is also in a sextile to Jupiter, and in, you know, Jupiter is in a sextile to Pluto. So all of this is like giving her a lot of power. But let's look at the problems here in her chart. She has Saturn squaring the moon, as I said, you know, so she encountered great opposition to have a job, you know, because she had 2 kids. The second pregnancy she had to hide in order for her to get the promotions, you know, because women back then, when she graduated, they were not being paid equal. Equal pay was something that she was fighting for at the Supreme Court. So it also brings this perspective here of gender. I think the fifth house has a lot to do with gender too, because it has to do with sexuality, and the eighth house has to do with sexuality too. So she has Saturn in the eighth house, which could be that she was fighting for this rigid. Saturn in Aquarius is like bringing a new era for a new paradigm for gender equality, right? The moon in Scorpio also defending sexual rights, the difference of gender, all of that. So Saturn in a square to her moon shows that she was like really into it. She was like ready to fight for it. And then we also see Jupiter in opposition to Venus, Jupiter in opposition to her sun, Jupiter in Virgo, which means that she was being pushed in her values. Jupiter Venus. And Jupiter's sun, it was about her identity. If you study a bit of her legacy, you will understand how much she fought for in order for women, Jupiter, Venus, to be able to stand for their own beliefs and rights, and then this whole, the sun in the 10th house, equal pay. Pisces is like how I feel about myself. I feel strong, so I'm gonna act strong. This axis here is about being in service to someone else, and since this axis here, the way I created the chart, that I suppose it's pretty much what could be the right chart for her. It's not that I have specialized myself in finding the right time for charts. I don't do that. But once you have a public figure like this, it's easier because you have the whole legacy behind, so that you can look back and say, okay, so she's done a lot for the community, for the gay community, for human rights. So let's see if Uranus works on the 11th house. Well, she gained a lot of power, and she solidified her power. So maybe she has Venus and Sun in the 10th house. Does it make sense? Yes. And she has Pallas in Aquarius in the 10th house. She has the head of the dragon in the 9th house, and she has the purse of fortune, which I rarely see any astrologer using this point, but I do a lot. Since I use the purse of fortune, or the wheel of fortune, since I started working with astrology. And it's funny because I have the wheel of fortune in the 12th house in Gemini. And I end up attracting a lot of Geminis. Even though I'm Pisces, I have a lot of friction with Gemini people. But at the end of the day, I end up attracting them, and they teach me things because, my wheel of fortune is in Gemini, and it's in the 12th house, which helps me penetrate the 12th house. So you should look for the wheel of fortune in your chart. This is going to help you a lot to identify some of your strengths. Okay, so coming back to Ruth's chart, I see here that she has a Uranus in a square. Uranus in Aries is in a square to Pluto in Cancer. So again, we are seeing here she is acting as a pioneer. The Mercury is in Aries, Uranus in Aries, very courageous, very bold. You know, she means what she says what she means, and you know, she puts her money where her mouth is. And then, but it's in a square. This shows the amount of opposition she was facing in the public scene, because she probably had to reach to more conservative judges in the Supreme Court in order for her to to um, to exercise this Venus in Pisces, right, in the midheaven. Which again, I'm creating this as a proposition of her chart, but it makes sense because of everything I have already exposed to you. So in the time of her birth, in the time of her death, Mars is here, is making a conjunction with Uranus, and at the same time is squaring her Pluto, right? Let's look this. Let me put this chart here on the side, and let's look at the chart. This is progressed chart. Let's look at this one, and then I will share my insights on her progressed chart as well. Okay, so here in the inner circle, you see her chart, her natal chart, exactly the one I showed you. And what I added here is the outside, it's her passing. Okay. How did I do this? I created a chart for her passing on astro.com, and then on the extended options, I opted to I selected synastry with the outer circle being her passing chart, which gives me the possibility to see her chart inside and her planets inside, and then where the transits on the outside. Okay, so if I look at where the planets were, you see Mars here at 27th degrees, and then Lilith, you know, you just go here and see where Lilith was at 26 degrees of Aries, and Mars was at 27 degrees of Aries, and they were both here. You know, she was probably dying slowly but surely, because you know, she was born with Uranus in an exact square to Pluto. You see Pluto here at 21 degrees of Cancer, and then Uranus at 21 degrees of Aries. So anything that hits this point hits in exact degree her Pluto, will also affect her Pluto. And then from this chart, it makes sense that Saturn, which rules the 8th house in this proposition that I'm presenting to you, Saturn rules her 7th house and rules her 8th house, and Saturn is entering the 8th house, preparing for her 3rd Saturn return, which she didn't live, you know, long enough to have her 3rd Saturn return, which would probably happen around her 90th birthday or so. I did not calculate that. But then you have Pluto here also entering the 8th house. But not only that, look at this here. This whole stellium in Capricorn is making an opposition to her Pluto, her natal Pluto, and it's also making a square to her Uranus in Aries, right? Look at where Pluto is. Pluto is at 22 degrees of Capricorn, which is Pluto is making an opposition to its natal position in her chart at 21 degrees. So this is like, she knew she was dying. Everyone knew she was dying. And this was a preparation. We are all going to live this cycle of Pluto in opposition to Pluto around our 27th birthday. These slow moving planets, they start making like very strong closing cycles. That's why we live, our life span is around 80 to 100 years old, because these slow moving planets, we have two slow moving planets, which is Jupiter, that takes 12 years to go around the zodiac, and we have Saturn that takes 29 point some years, 29 and a half years to go around the zodiac. But then the next one, which is Uranus, takes 84 years to go around the zodiac to complete one cycle. And then we had, which she survived her Uranus return, because Uranus is already here in Taurus. So she did have her Uranus returned, and she survived it. I don't know what happened here. Maybe if we do a extensive research in her chart, which we could do some other time, we can see what happened there. But the most important thing is that Jupiter is making an opposition to Pluto, right? Pluto is making an opposition to his natal position in Cancer, and at the same time they are squaring Uranus. Pluto is squaring Uranus, is making an opposition to Pluto. I mean, when you survive such a harsh transit, it means like you're gonna have something that it's going to impact you, at this point. But then when you have a square between these two, it's like you feel like you're being bombarded, right? Pluto in Capricorn making an opposition to Pluto, and at the same time making a square to Uranus, and taking into consideration that Uranus is in the natal position in a square to Pluto. That's a lot. That's really a lot. Now, you see that Neptune is also is preparing to, it was sometime last year, he was conjunct her Venus, like taking a lot of her energy away, like really bringing her values to a more inner space, preparing her for the passing, which I think she did it beautifully, because she kept working, it was like she did this treatment. She had this radiation treatment, and everyone thought that she would never go back to the court. And then one day she appears in a program on TV, and she gives an interview, which I posted on the New Paradigm Astrology community. You can watch it there. But anyways, when you have Neptune in Pisces, he rules Pisces. It takes 145, 147 years for Neptune to complete a whole transit around the zodiac. And we are experiencing this moment when we are right now experiencing this transit of Neptune in Pisces, right? And she's a Piscean. So this last year she had Pisces on top of her Venus, and with everything that we have said, you can see how a soul is preparing to pass away, to transcend. I recently lost my boyfriend, which in May 13th he died of an accident. And I can say that there is like a membrane, like from this world that we live in to the living, to the world of the dead. They are just a fraction. We are all fragments of this big bang. We are stardust. We are like merging energies all the time with spirits, with our ancestors. We only remember maybe our great grandparents, but we are like our DNA has been, circling around and mingling with other people. So there is a whole field of energy that allows us to think about, how lucky one is if you prepare yourself for the passing. And then I also want to suggest that you study a little bit the bardos, the Tibetan bardos, which is like they have, I think it's 5 or 6 bardos. The bards, I don't know how to say that in English, but one of them is about death, and we're all gonna die, even though we have a very hard time speaking about death. And I just think that we all need to be prepared for that, because when that happens, we need to know what to do, not only with ourselves, instead of like when we feel that our physical energy is trying to trespass to another world. We need to go with the flow, and just pray to God that we will not suffer so much, because the same suffering that a baby has when it's trying to enter this realm of physical existence, we have no idea. Especially like I was in labor for 23 hours. My daughter was just banging to come out for 23 hours. After 23 hours, I delivered this most beautiful baby. But I'm telling you, oh my God, it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing. And for the mother, there is a moment that you think you're going to die. I don't know, maybe a lot of other people had easy labors where you just deliver the baby, which wasn't my case. So I could really see how a woman could die from labor, from delivering a baby. And so think about when people enter this realm, it's as hard as when they leave. The only difference is that when someone is born, we celebrate, and when someone dies, we feel sad. But it doesn't happen without cultures. A lot of cultures, they just they just allow their body to be, they burn it. It's easier when you burn it, because then you don't think about what happens to the body later. It just goes back to light. It becomes light. So yeah, well, I'm talking about this because we are looking at a chart from somebody who just died, and I have the feeling that I'm channeling a message from the gods of death, Pluto. We're talking about someone who has Pluto, in Cancer, so I had to address this thing about, birth and death, because this is like typical subject that that could be popping up with a circumstance like this. But then again, just to look at her, the passing moment, when the chart of her passing moment, we have here then Chiron is in is conjunct her Aries. You see this? Aries is at 2 degrees. Remember that Kai Pacha is always telling us how slow Aries is. It takes her, I think, 500 years for Aries to transit a sign. So we see Chiron here conjuncting her her Aries, and also conjuncting her Mercury, which I think she's gonna bring a lot of reflection about what to do next, how this whole election is going to it's just going to change a lot of the scenario on this election, because if Trump really gets the hand on nominating another Supreme Court justice, the whole American Supreme Court, it's going to be a lot more conservative, and a lot of people may lose their health insurance, because that's what the conservative agenda is. So there's a lot at stake here, a lot at stake, and we are seeing from the charts that I created that Aries and Mars and Uranus are transiting her 11th house, which brings a lot of energy to discuss the future. The 11th house is about the future, and the future of projects, of laws, of the communities. So all of that is at stake at this moment, right? And I also want to tell you guys that the fourth house is the house of the fourth house. Oh, sorry about this one here. The fourth house is also the house of the first portion of your life, and also the last portion of your life. And looking at her passing chart, the sun was here in the fourth house, telling her it's time to go. Okay, Pluto is in her 8th house. Remember that we are creating this as a possibility. And then we also see the moon and Mercury in the 5th house, which could mean that she died at home with her kids alongside her. So this also allows us to think that this chart is pretty much accurate. Her ascendant in the time of her birth, in the time of her passing, which I think was around 5 p.m., because it was when people started coming to the TV to say that to give the news that she passed. So I think it was this time of the day. And then the ascendant was on Saturn here, like really putting an end to her life too. And so the next chart I want to share with you is her progressed chart, which again, it all depends on the time of her birth. And as you know, I am doing a proposition that this is like pretty much what looks like to be the accurate, or not accurate, but pretty reasonable chart for her, for Ruth Ginsburg. In this chart, the progress chart for September 20th, which is today, we see here Uranus in the 8th house, okay, which could be really the death, the moment of her death. Remember that she was born with Uranus in a square in, remember her natal chart, she was born with Uranus square Pluto in the ascendant in the chart that I have created. So Uranus is in a square in this secondary progression. Uranus is in the 8th house, Pluto is in the 11th house, and Pluto being in the 11th house, bringing all this commotion, this, you know, this whole thing that it's happening that with everyone, you know, how she has touched the lives of so many people. And then we have here Lilith in the 10th house, Sun in the 10th house, Venus in the 10th house, Mercury in the 10th house, Vesta in the 10th house, you know, showing how much she took presence in the political stage, you know, and how much of her death, 8th house and 11th house, is going to bring about some kind of like revolution to the political scene, because Lilith is here in Gemini. And right at this moment where we are seeing, you know, this whole political scenario with a conspiracy theories, you know, which is a typical Gemini. She could have been someone who would just hold a little bit of, you know, of that lucidity, clarity, detail-oriented mind. But, you know, the fact that she died while the sun was in Gemini also shows us that she was, you know, her cognitive abilities were preserved, because Gemini is the thinking process, the everyday thinking process. So, you know, it was preserved. Not only it was preserved, but it was matured. Look at Saturn here in the 6th house in her progression, which also shows us, you know, the depth of her, the deepening of her health problems, because Saturn in the progress chart is in the 6th house. And the moon in the 5th house again shows that she died with her kids around her. And then we also see, I'm sorry about this, the noise outside. And so what else here? We see Mars is making a square to her sun. Jupiter is making a square to her sun. And you know what? Look at this, having Jupiter and Mars in Virgo in the 1st house in the time of her birth also shows that she died at home. You know, Jupiter helped her, died at home. She didn't have to go to an intensive care, you know. Jupiter protected her, and Neptune in the 10th in her 12th house shows that like she was just like super ready to enter this 12th house. Actually, she had already entered the 12th house. You know, she was preparing herself. She was wise enough at this point of her life to just let the power go and enter the realm of the 12th house. So you know what? I think that we explored a lot here, and I don't want to go any further, because we could keep you know, exploring more and more. But you know, even her progress chart shows that Pluto was here in the 5th house making an opposition. Talking about transit, if I put the transits here in her secondary progression, Pluto and Saturn and Jupiter are here in her 5th house. making an opposition to her natal Pluto. Oh, sorry, about her making opposition to Pluto in Cancer. Okay, and if I am right, and if this chart is right, you know, she spent the last many years having Saturn transiting her fourth house, which is the end of life. You know, progress charts, you can also have the transits. See, you can also get take the actual present transits and project it on your progress chart, and you will see where the planets are interacting with your secondary progress chart. Okay, so let me stop here. Let me see if I can bring you guys back. I think we have 2 guests. Yeah. Wait. Hey, Jen, you're still there. Thank you so much, darling. Oh my God. Okay, so let me take this. I think I'm gonna stop my share here and I'm gonna unmute you. Do you want to say something, darling?
Oh, what a fantastic rap. It was brilliant.
Did you like it?
Sorry?
Did you like it?
Oh, yeah, it was great. I can't believe how good a job you could do when you've got one person in an audience even. And such a great, like you covered everything. I put a few notes in there, like the transiting nodes, I think now are in Gemini too, aren't they? That I thought, you know, but, and I wondered with the Uranus, you talked about her Uranus return, and I thought, I wonder about the timing of her husband's passing might have been about then.
Could have been.
Yeah.
Like I said, you know, her chart, because she's a public figure, we can go further into, you know, picking some, like when she had the babies, when she was nominated for the Supreme Court, which was in 1993, you know. It was probably the time when her husband died, because when Uranus went back, had the return, it was also squaring her Pluto.
Wow. Like, I think it's a really, because the charts that I've seen, I've looked at them and thought, oh, I thought I'd see something in the 9th, you know, because of just who she was, and that 2 degrees heiress, like she was the second woman the judge, and she's got a 2 degrees heiress, so it's like I just thought there was a nice touch to it, you know. So no, brilliant job, wonderful.
Did you think it was funny, because when I started playing around to see, you know, how the chart that I created, because we didn't have, I don't know who is going to come up with the time of her birth, but I didn't find it on the internet. So I said, well, let me try to adjust this chart and see if it makes sense according to my story. You know? So
I really felt that. I think it's a really good rectification, because when I was starting to think about it myself, I was thinking, oh, would she have some Libra? And I thought, no, she was too forceful for that. You know, she needed something stronger, and that Aries, you know, like that 9th house there was, I thought, really good.
But and well, she was bold as any Mercury and Uranus in Aries was, right? And the whole it's funny too that her whole generation had Uranus. I mean, the whole generation, no, because Uranus only stays for 9 years in a sign, but she was like from a generation of women that were already restless. with a status quo, because she was born with Uranus at 21 degrees of Aries. So people came before, when you know, there was like 7 years where women and people were born with Uranus. Those people that were born with Uranus in Aries, they started having a voice.
Yeah.
And since she had Uranus at 21 degrees, so that means that, you know, we have to think about that too. People came before her already had, you know, like the whole decade, people that came before her already had that drive to make changes and all of that, you know. Yeah, so it's very interesting. We could do a lot of research related to this whole, what happened during the transit, when Uranus was in Aries, squaring Pluto.
Yes. What
Right?
happened there? Yeah.
Squaring Pluto in Cancer, so it's the whole family thing. When it, you know, it was like being touched, the values of family, of women rights, because of, you know, Cancer is very related to motherhood, and, you know, women started to go to the university back then, being bold enough to go to university. And yeah, very interesting. And why is that I thought that she had Cancer rising? Because she was shy, you know, even though she was like, you know,
tough exterior, but underneath. Yeah. Someone has already made a t-shirt for her, and it's a black t-shirt, and it has collars on, gloves off is the wording of it, because she wore that beautiful collar that is very prominent. So I just wonder, like, I think she'll be a motivator for now. You know, we had sort of the Me Too thing. They had those little pink pussy cat hats. I think this t-shirt, this collar, will actually be prominent.
Yeah, well, the pussy hats it's for women, the Women March. You know, the Women March that started in 2000. I think it started in 2016. I was living in New York back then, and I took part in the Women's March in New York City, and I was just like, I was walking in the streets of New York by myself for 8 hours, you know, and it was like the strongest feeling I have ever felt, to start in a social movement of that strength. I mean, that was like something, and they are bringing it back now.
Yes, and I think
it back now because of her. Because
I think it's really, I get this really strong feeling about it. I get a strong feeling of truth, and I just have this really strong feeling through this talk of who she was and what she's now going to do, you know, like what she's going to make people look at.
From this other realm, right? Which is something Pisces can easily do, right?
She's not too far away though, is she? She's like right there.
And you know, the Bard, which is the Tibetan book of death, they say that it takes 49 days for the spirit to really, you know, elevate and detach from the material world down here. You know, I still, like I said, but my boyfriend just died, and he comes to visit me very often.
Oh, isn't that lovely though?
We have a very vivid ongoing conversation. It's amazing. I don't know if it is because we both have I was 18 years older than him, so we had the head of the dragon in the same degree, and
wow,
in Virgo, and the south node was in Pisces. So our spiritual connection is pretty strong, even though he's no longer here.
Yeah, wow.
Well, my dear, you know what? It was a pleasure interacting with you. You know,
Oh,
my
I really, really enjoyed it. I was so hoping someone would do it, but without the birth time, people were really reluctant, I think. Well, no. I saw the news as it broke and I thought, oh, what does this mean for that country? Because I don't know a lot about your politics, but I'm trying to stay with it. But I just thought, oh, what is this, you know? So thank you for doing it, and I'm so glad I got to be here.
And isn't that beautiful that you're Pisces? I am Pisces. So is she. Ruth is
Yeah,
Pisces too. So we're just like the three of
we're
us
the, we're the,
connected.
we're the water trine, the grand water
Yeah.
trine.
Yes, yes. So I am. I'm going to post this with your consent at the new
Yes.
paradigm. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Okay, I will do that, and I hope you stay tuned for upcoming conversations about astrology. It was a pleasure interacting with you, my dear.
Okay then. Bye-bye.
Bye.